Never just roll over what you've been doing. Make sure you read that requirement because sometimes the government changes its mind.
Welcome, everyone, to the Optimized Podcast brought to you by VisibleThread. I'm your host, Jeff Shapiro. I am very fortunate to be joined by Shauna Weatherly.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jeff.
Oh, so great to have you, Shauna. Let me give you a little brief bio on Shauna so you all know who we're talking to today. I've been following Shauna for a while on LinkedIn. She's given great advice for contractors, current employees, given this current situation, all around, and it has a lot of great experience. Everyone, when I talk to clients, I'm all about it's really important to stay in touch with your contracting officer. Well, guess what? I got you a contracting officer. So here she is. So let me give a little more details. Shauna is an experienced federal acquisition subject matter expert with over 35 years of experience awarding and managing federal contracts valued in excess of $750 billion with a B. After retiring from federal civilian service in December of 2022, Shauna is now the president and founder of Federal Subcontract Solutions, otherwise known as FedSubK, specializing in helping small businesses better understand and navigate federal acquisition policies and processes as primes or subcontractors. So who better to talk to than Shauna when, the age of Doge is on us, and if you're a
Yeah.
small business, this is a tough time, Shauna. We talked about this in a session recently, and
Yeah.
before I get into that topic, excuse me, let me first, I got to ask you the fun questions first. So excuse me.
Okay.
So all of us who end up in government contracting is usually not a straight and narrow path. It's usually something unusual. So I want to hear your path and how you got into government contracting.
Well, it was definitely not straight and narrow. I started out in the federal space as a military spouse, actually, in
Ah,
1987. I was stationed over in Germany with my husband, and he was in the army. And the best gig in town was a federal job, obviously over there. And I never thought I'd do it, but I did. And then I moved into a stationing position over there. And then we got orders back to the United States, and I got a job as a secretary with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
wow.
It was really neat. I was in Chicago, started at Chicago District, and had a chance to do a procurement technician position there after my secretary position. Moved into that doing AE contracting work primarily, sitting in on those negotiations and doing bonds for construction projects and things like that. And just applied for a DA internship that took me back to where my family was in California, and started my acquisition career there about 8 years into my career, total. So in 1995, I got that internship and then just moved up in the acquisition field from there.
Fabulous. And so you spent quite a bit of time then still in what Army you said, and then later you had quite a bit of time in GSA.
Yeah, yeah, I did a 2-year stint at FAA in between the Corps of
Oh,
Engineers and
yeah.
GSA. Yeah, so, but yeah, I was in GSA for the last 10 years of my career.
Fabulous. So be great to hear a little bit of that perspective as well. Latest news that, some contracting function is going to possibly fold it into GSA. So definitely be good to
Right.
talk a bit about that. Like I said earlier, let's definitely talk about the impacts of Doge on small businesses.
Great.
Uh, Huge impact, lots of fear. Tell us what you're seeing and how you're advising your clients.
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing is there's a lot of unknowns around how the small business socioeconomic programs are going to kind of play out here in the age of, non DEI, and how far is that going to be taken in terms of, interpretation of that into those programs. I've been reminding everybody those are statutorily set programs. So they do have statutory requirements in terms of goaling and participation and things like that. So I don't believe there's a lot of concern to worry about those programs going away. I'm thinking they could look slightly different. Maybe the outreach regarding those programs might be different, but that doesn't mean they're going to be gone. And, as a former contracting officer myself, I always wanted to know 8As were out there. I always wanted to know women-owned small businesses were out there. So I don't see that changing in the landscape in terms of the contracting officers, wanting to know who's available and out there. Businesses are concerned about leading with their certifications. I always tell them to never lead with your certifications. So I don't think that changes much right now either. But I do think small businesses have to, like we talked about and you kind of led into a little bit, diversify. If you're thinking you're only gonna go after prime, maybe prime and sub, or if, supplier routes, or maybe just sub. Subcontracting is a lucrative business in the federal space. It's not just prime. So, there's a lot of avenues and entry points, and I think just, the biggest advice I'm telling my clients is don't put all your eggs into one basket right now, especially in the federal space. You need to be looking and turning over the rocks, as William Randolph, a person I love out on LinkedIn, says all the time, is, turn over the rocks and find the other options that maybe you just haven't been aware of because you've been looking in one place.
Yeah, absolutely. So going to industry days, meeting with
Yes.
people. And so it's like usually industry days, your purpose is, well, what is this agency trying to buy this year? Why don't you look to your left and to your right? They may, and sometimes they're not even large businesses. Sometimes they're fellow small businesses. You're like,
Absolutely.
yeah. So like talking about, how to find that complementary service and how to figure out teaming. Like what's the secrets to teaming and finding a good teaming partner?
Well, I think the secret is just not being afraid of your competition, right? I mean, I think you need to embrace your competition sometimes, and you need to be looking at different groups of people. Who do you follow on LinkedIn and how do you feel about them? Are they resonating with you as a business owner? And if they are, reach out to them and start talking to them and talk about the opportunities that you can both bring together and maybe collaborate on. I think collaborative teaming arrangements is gonna be something smalls are gonna have to embrace in the new what we're seeing coming down the pike here in the federal space. So, I just encourage people to just, don't think you have to fly solo. It's really important to kinda get out there and meet people and, use these events as networking events with other small businesses, not just with the agencies at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of finding those opportunities besides industry day, what other ideas do you give these smaller businesses for, developing capture strategies? I mean, especially now, when there's uncertainty, there should be
Right.
opportunity to a certain extent, right? So,
Yeah.
where should you be turning now for your capture strategy to find these opportunities?
Well, I think, I always tell people to start with the data, but going back years in data now is not going to help you. I think it's going to show a false sense of what's out there
Mm,
and what is we're looking at. So maybe you want to look at the data in the last 6 months or the last quarter, even just to kind of get a feel for what's been awarded and look for some gaps there. I also think you need to re-engage with your current clients or your relationships that you have in government and ask very carefully, very sensitively, because there's a lot of, angst out there in the federal workplace right now. But, just because people are leaving the federal government doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be looking to replace them with, contractor bodies. But there are going to be gaps in what needs to be done. And, we saw this in the 90s, even though this was done at a much slower pace in terms of, riff back then. But we did see that it got cut and then contractor staff ended up, being used. And that's where this whole service contract reporting requirement came from back then, right?
which is
So,
now gone. That's so
which is
crazy.
now gone. Yeah, I
Oh,
know it's
never knew that would
bizarre
ever
to
go
me.
away.
I know I'm shocked that's gone, quite frankly, because I thought that was a really good eye,
Sure.
on kind of the balance between the federal workforce and the contractor workforce. But yeah, I mean, I think it's about, just re-engaging in some of those relationships, letting people know you're still there, you're still available, you're still interested. Because I think contracting officers are hearing, and I am hearing from my own clients and small businesses that people are pivoting. They're pivoting to commercial sector, they're pivoting to, state, local government, higher education. That's all good because we understand you have to stay viable. But, the federal government is gonna need people at some point, and, just letting people know you're still out there and you're still interested, I think is important, and reengaging and talking to folks on a one-on-one level even, just kind of building that relationship just a little bit further, talking about the pain points they're having, just just in a daily life of a Fed right now. The stress that comes with it and how you can relate to that as maybe a business because you feel the same way, waiting for opportunities and things like that. So, kind of building that relationship maybe in a different way.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about that. I remember at some point, I think it was the Office of Federal Procurement Policy that put out the MythBusters memo. Was it them or was it was it GSA or
I
FPP? One of the
oh,
two. All right, let's
yeah,
just.
one of the two.
But
I
there's
can't
definitely a
remember right now.
MythBusters memo that one of pri- uh, the annual topic in that memo was contracting officers can never interact with industry, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, so that's long been told, like like that's sort of contracting officer's job, right? So trying to get in touch with contracting officers. And I get it right now, it's a bit tough of a place.
right.
Some contracting officers have had, can I say it this way, warrants suspended, or I don't know,
Yes.
is that the right term?
Yeah, it's the right
Um,
term, yeah.
and so they're somewhat limited, but still they're often the faces of the agency still, or for their branch, division, whatever name you want to give it.
Right.
And they understand the needs of the group that they're supporting. Should folks be reaching out directly to contracting officers? Is it the project managers, the branch chiefs? Like, how do you find these people?
Well, I think a good place to start that I don't think people always remember is the small business specialists at every agency, right? And every office tends to have that person. And they are really the internal advocate for small businesses, and they can connect you with all those other people because they are involved in all those decisions that occur, in terms of acquisition strategy. Those are all routed through that person for review over certain dollar values, and they are kind of the responsible party to kind of collect this pool of known interested small businesses to kind of help you advocate internally. So I would say that's usually a safe place to start, especially in a stressful time like this, because that is their job. That is, they are a point person for that. So I would say trying that first and then see where you can go from there. But contracting officers, they're probably pretty crazy right now because they're canceling contracts. They don't have a lot of authority right now. Unfortunately, they're not allowed to make some of those independent decisions that they have in the past. And temporarily, we don't know how long, but I think the small business specialist is a good first step to try and kind of gauge kind of the temperature right now at an agency or an office.
Yeah, and all those offices should still have websites where you have points of contact to call into,
Yeah,
or email.
correct.
Um, how about PTAX? I think that program's still going.
Well, PTACs are now the Apex accelerators, right?
Apex and
So,
salary.
but
Yes.
yeah, I mean they're a good place to start too, right? And they've got a lot of great resources and great folks that can help point you in directions too. And they're connected with those local agencies that they serve. So that's a great suggestion as well.
Love it. Now, let's talk about prime contractors. So you talked about, not only looking to be primes, but looking to be subs. I mean,
Right.
small business goals are not going away.
No.
There was some talk recently that like they're trying to, SBA was trying to figure out a way to put some teeth into enforcing those plans. I don't know if you have any insight on that, or if you want to talk about how just trying to
Well,
find the right primes.
Well, I'd like to see them go back to doing some subcontracting plan surveillance reviews. We did those, back in the early 2000s, where large businesses who had a lot of subcontracting, we would go out and literally go talk to the business. We would look at their files on how they made these promises in their plan about their outreach to small business and how they vet small businesses and how they determine who gets their subcontracts and what subcontracts and things like that. So I would like to see some more, push behind those surveillance reviews coming back and actually, hold some people's feet to the fire a little bit on those things other than just saying, "Well, you didn't give me any work that I could subcontract out, so, didn't do it." But yeah, I think, looking at large businesses' websites, a lot of them have supplier portals that you can sign up for, so I think that's a really good way to start. Reaching out to larges at some of these industry events, like the SAME, Society for American Military Engineers, has great events where they have large and small businesses. They, all the industry days. Larges go to small business industry days too. They don't, they're looking for people as well. So I think another way people don't realize is maybe taking an opportunity to a large business and saying, "Hey, I found this opportunity. I can do this really great niche part in here, but I need somebody like you to be a prime. How do you feel about teaming?" I think subs often forget that if they bring opportunities to primes, that shows value, right? And I think that's another way subs can, you know, introduce themselves and maybe ingratiate themselves a little bit to large businesses in terms of, helping find those opportunities as well.
Love it. How about trying to chase after simplified acquisition threshold contracts? You think that's going to continue to flourish? I think they increased the threshold there.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna see that threshold hopefully go up to $350,000 from the 250, which I think is great. I love that. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't even go higher, frankly. And those are all set aside for small businesses automatically unless the government can, justify otherwise. So yeah, I mean, that is the perfect niche place to start for small businesses is those smaller opportunities as you find them opening up. So, yeah, I think simplified acquisitions are the way to kind of test your mettle in the federal market and really kind of learn before you get that, maybe $1 million contract. That's the goal in the end, right? So,
Yeah, a qual is a qual is a qual. I
experience
don't.
is experience is experience, right?
Exactly. So, like, no one's gonna give you less points because you gained experience doing it on a SAT versus a subcontract versus
No.
something else, right?
No,
Well, that's the
absolutely
point.
not. I mean, in the evaluations, we're looking at same and similar in terms of the type of work, maybe the size of work and usually the agency or agencies that you've done the work for. So I mean, if you can hit a couple of those, even if you haven't done the work, but let's say you've done multiples of those concurrently, maybe even, that's great. I mean, that shows the breadth to do a larger contract. So that's not a bad thing.
Oh, love it, love it. So long more about this diversification that we talked about earlier. Um, how, again, getting into state, local, commercial, what's that going to do for you? I mean, we kind of just answered that with the set, but what can that do for you? What kind of doors can that open for you in the future?
Yeah, well, I mean, the procurement market is, robust at state and local levels. There's even things like school districts and other things that you can think of. I have a client that does federal work all the way down to the LA County School District. So, that's something they diversify through. And I think that's something that people need to understand that it's still got its own process. You may have to register in a separate supplier portal or get a different certification at a state level. But I will tell you, a lot of those states leverage SAM.gov and your registration there. When I
Yeah.
was in the SAM.gov office, I don't think we realized this until we did the migration from DUNS to UEI that, the states were pointing people to SAM and saying, well, if you register in SAM, then we know you're good because we know they do the IRS check and we know they do the check for exclusions and payments and bad debts to the government and all those things. So we don't have to do it. If you're there and we can look you up there, we know you're good. So, that's one thing the state and local governments leverage that system quite a bit to make sure you're good. So keeping your certification up there, even or your registration up there, even if you switch to another portion of the procurement ecosystem, right, in state and local government, is a good thing. That helps you. You may have to get a minority women business enterprise type of certification at a state level, but they're typically not going to be any more rigorous than the federal one that you've gone through. So if you have a certification there through SBA, and then it's again supplier portals, getting your name on vendors lists, all those types of things. It's almost the same process, just kind of little smaller, more compact. I'm not gonna say any less regulated because it can be in some states,
Sure.
but it's if you've gone through it at the federal level, the state and local level, you'll be able to navigate it.
Love it. Love it. So let's talk about SAM.gov, which seems to not be a hugely talked about subject, but like how many, I mean, small businesses are hammered by these folks who say, your SAM.gov registration is about to run out. We need to do this for you or else you're going to get penalized. Can you give some fair warning on these scammers and
Yeah.
what really needs to happen with your SAM.gov?
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of people out there that are get this list off SAM.gov, as you're starting to expire, they can go out and pull records and they're going to start calling you. I get the calls too. I have a lot of fun with the calls when I get them, quite frankly.
Start recording them and putting them on.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny. I mean, I was getting them while I was still a Fed because I had registered my business in SAM knowing I was getting ready to retire, not using it, not making it public, but we used it as kind of a playground for while I was working in the office. And so I would get these emails and I would get these and I would turn them in. And, SAM.gov is interested in knowing if people are posing as SAM.gov. So if anybody out there has that happen and you don't see any disclaimers, feel free to send it to me. I will push it on to my friends in the SAM.gov office where I left. But there are people out there that will try to tell you it costs money to register, that there is a scoring system and that your score is not high enough. That's a bunch of baloney. It is something you can do for free. Your Apex accelerators can help you through that. There's lots of GovCons out here that are willing to help and even do it for free. I do coaching on that and charge next to nothing, if anything, to do it. Just depends on what you're trying to do or how bad it's been messed up and we got to fix it. But it's really just kind of walking through step by step. And paying attention if you don't know the terms to the glossaries or looking that stuff up, and which is why I have a resource library on my website to try and help people figure that out. And I've tried to point out the best knowledge articles that Sam has in its library or knowledge base so that people can find that information quicker to walk them through. But yeah, that entity validation, it's difficult, but you don't need to pay somebody to do it. If you just look at the paper that says, and there is a very nice handout that says what documentation you need and what it has to say. If you've got that, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, I agree. But that being said, there are some certifications in there,
Mhm.
and they're also, important things if you're uh, certain uh, types of entities that you put that in SAM, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, you do that in SAM initially. The SBA system, once you have the certifications there at my SBA certifications, those will eventually roll over once you receive your certifications into your SAM record. It can take a week or so to get them in there, but they will automatically populate and you will see your record will show your SBA certification. So there's really nothing for you to do there. But you can self certify to be a veteran owned business. You can self certify to be a minority owned business, woman owned, same like that. So yes, you do make indications like that about your business. You make indications about your size standards, certain have you ever held previous contracts before? And if so, were you compliant with certain issues like EEO notifications and things like that? But typically all those representations and certifications in the FAR and DFARs that can be very overwhelming for filling in, you answer most of those through questions, yes or no, and some answers in SAM. So it will auto populate most of those answers for you. So it's really just a matter of kind of walking through those. And if you're not sure what they mean, hit somebody up like me
yeah,
and we can help explain it.
love it, love it. So we're talking about Doge. We got to talk about NICS codes a little bit. Again, we're hitting all the really hot topics. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm joking, but talk about NICS codes, what that means, and especially now, like for instance, we've seen all the policy memos about consulting companies and how the federal government has to defend the spend on, especially on consulting.
Right.
That make you want to rethink your 5-4 whatever NICS code?
Yeah, well, I'm in a 541611 X code myself, so
There you go.
yes, I don't have the word consulting in my name, so I feel happy about that, which can also be another target right now, honestly, with keywords that Doge is also using. So, yeah, I mean, you may want to go in and break down the type of consulting work you do into like, see what other NAICS codes it can stretch into. Is it professional services? Is it engineering? Is it financial management? Is it training? And maybe see if you need to branch into a few other NAICS codes that maybe help augment and explain what you do. I've been trying to tell people is don't think about times right now about what you want to sell to the government. Think about what you can sell to the government. Breaking apart what you do. I mean, if you're an expert in, let's say, a certain type of reporting, let's say strategic management plans or something, break that out into tasks and how does that line up in an AICS code versus, maybe a front to end consulting, solution for something, let's say. So, yeah, I think it's kind of like we're going to have to rethink a little bit how we word some things and how we approach, what we want to offer to the government.
So I think what I'm backing myself into, and I didn't realize I was doing it, maybe you can give us a sneak peek behind the curtain around market research and how contracting officers do that. Because that NAICS codes made me think of it. So I thought, hey, I got the right person to ask that question.
Well, when we're looking at a requirement, the requiring activity doesn't tell us what NAICS code it goes into. The contracting officer has to make that determination. And a lot of times it's not very clear. Now there was a rule in 2014, I believe, that came out where we could use multiple NAICS codes. And that's been out there for a while. The problem is that the systems end of it, the FPDS
FPDS,
and
yeah.
the SAM and all that has not caught up to it. So that's why you don't see that as prevalent. But I remember back even in, the early 2000s where we would put a primary and then secondaries on there. And we'd use the size standard based on the primary, but we knew we had secondary work under that acquisition. So we would make sure everybody was aware. But what you're doing is you're looking to see who can perform in what NAICS code. You're pulling the data through DSBS, or even if you're doing an RFI, you're going to indicate a NAICS codes out there and let people know what you're looking for, and then you do your market research based on that. So it is important to have multiple NAICS codes, not too many, because you don't want to have a bunch that make you look like you don't know what you're doing, scattered,
Yeah,
right?
you're probably not a manufacturer and a provider of
Yeah.
basket weaving
IT.
service.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. You're not an IT consulting company and
Yeah.
also an engineering company and also an environmental cleanup company. Yeah, you're
Mm,
probably not all those things.
yeah.
So just making sure you can thread them together somehow in the story of what you provide is important. And you can do that through your NAICS, your website. You can do that through the RFI responses, and you can do it on your write up if you're a small business through your DSBS profile.
Love it. Love it. So slightly bit of a pivot. So you're a new company, you're seeing some of the fallout in the government, and you have some innovative technologies. What's your advice for these folks getting in? Do they need a GSA contract?
Well, I'm a proponent that you don't need a GSA contract if you don't have anybody to sell your services to yet. So, GSA contracts are really, in my opinion, a marketing tool. They're there so that you can walk into an agency and say, I have a vehicle you can get to me. You have that relationship already built. Or maybe it's a vehicle to help you match up with other GSA schedule holders where you can form a contractor teaming arrangement that is special to FAR Part 8, requirements where it's several GSA schedule holders that provide a total response. But I think it's really important to one, again, network, see who's doing what you're doing and see if there's a place for you to fit in. And two, building the relationships, talking to the right people, going to those, like you said, those networking things. I mean, if you're a small business and you're in the IT field and you're not going to the IT consortiums and things like that, that's where you need to go. So, don't go to just your general small business conference. If you've got to pick between the two, go to the one that's in the lane that you provide services in, because that's where you're going to meet your best networking partners. But there are things such as unsolicited proposals that people can do. I think I'm not a huge proponent of them because I think agencies kind of look at them and go,
I was going to
and
ask how many awards have you given on unsolicited proposals? Okay.
zero.
How about value added? What's the ones where they come back and propose a solution that helps save money? Is there's
Oh,
any
like the value engineering?
value engineering? Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. We've done a couple of those at
Oh,
the
okay.
core. At the core, yeah, but it's only because we required they put them in,
Okay.
as part of construction, they have to have those in there for value engineering. But yeah, I mean, I've done some other kind of creative ways, but that's after somebody's already got a contract, right? But I mean, VA has a couple of programs where people can bring new innovative items to VA if it's in terms of medical and things like that, and they're out on their website. I think I have those linked at my own website, but I'm happy to show people where those are. But there's some programs like that at some of the agencies.
Yeah, I mean, but how about AftWorks, InQtel,
Oh yeah,
those kinds of, innovation cells, so to speak. I know DHS also has like a fusion cell as well.
yeah.
Um,
Those are all good options as well. And I think even, we have the ACT, what is it? ICTAIC. I always get it wrong, but it's the government
it's okay.
private sector consortium
Yeah,
that comes together and meets to try to do innovation. And I'll get it right and I'll give it to you later. But they're awesome as well.
yeah,
So
I agree. So how do you how do you find these unusual opportunities? Is it like whether it's a Sivers maybe is another avenue we haven't discussed yet, or the folks that do the OTA consortiums, uh,
right.
consortia. Uh, any insight on those
Well, I don't
alternative?
follow well, they're great alternatives. I don't follow them as closely just because I feel like they're more of a niche, but there is a lot of talk coming on OTAs, like being more prevalent in the new post Doge, post, started this administration's work. And I can see that happening. I don't see a problem with that. A lot of agencies, even like Air Force, Army, they have their own OTA, specific award groups even and I've gone to several events here just locally where I live in Oklahoma, where those folks are there, and they're very, popular with the groups to talk to because could be a quicker way in the door.
Yeah, I love it. And then speaking of which, I mean, the FAR has always been written that procurement should preference commercial over negotiated contracts.
Right.
And, the first Trump administration made a push for increased commercial buying, commercial item determinations. Is you see that going to be exploding? How's that going to turn out here?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can classify your item or services commercially, that's great, and I think businesses don't think often enough about establishing just a commercial price list for their company. I've been talking to a lot of people about that when they're talking about, maybe looking at a GSA schedule or something because you have to or have had to, maybe that I think that's changing also, determine who your most, favored customer is. Sometimes that's just whoever your commercial client is. So establishing a commercial price list doesn't mean you have to hold yourself to it. You can always discount from it. You can always augment it. You can always, you know, create, tasks that are, kind of a menu off of it. But I think it's always a good exercise for companies to think about their products and services as commercial. We all like to think, and I know especially when I was in DoD, we like to think that we were so unique that everything we did could not be commercial. And there was no way, that, building this building or whatever it was could be commercial. And same at FAA when I was buying products there. I hate to tell people, but most things are commercial now, if you think about it, if you
Yeah,
really break
drones.
it down. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, everyone's got a drone now.
yeah. My husband has one. Little itty bitty thing, but,
Yeah,
still.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what you're doing and try to set up like catalog pricing or commercial pricing that you can use, I think that will help you, in the commercial space because you can help the government justify how your item's commercial. That if they're looking for help, you can help them, write those determinations. I have seen, contracting officers go to companies and say, I'm struggling to write your a commerciality thing. Can you help me? Because we want to get your product or your whatever, and yeah, I mean that's not unheard of.
No, yeah, I love that. and that goes back to what we were talking before about the importance of diversification. I mean, now's the time to find some commercial customers, and then if you can show that you've been selling your product or good, including people's time at a
Right.
commercial rate, you could go back and say, "Look, I provide IT help desk services to Colgate and Procter and Gamble." I don't know why I'm picking all consumer brands. Uh, for
Right.
X dollars per hour, I now can offer to you, to help with your student loan
Right.
servicing or whatever you need a call center for IRS.
Yeah, I mean, my clients, we set up commercial price lists for hourly rates for their different labor categories, for their other direct costs, for their travel, for, all those things. It doesn't have to be just a product that's like a catalog that you're used to seeing. It can be services that you can catalog as well. And think about even task-based services that you can offer that you offer, could offer commercially.
Yeah, I love it. So, so Shauna, with such a long career, you've seen lots of changes in FAR, you've seen lots of changes in policy. Where are we going next? What are you thinking?
Wow.
Sorry, that's a loaded question, and we will not hold you to the answer.
Oh, yeah, please don't hold me because I think every time I think I've got it figured out, something changes, right? But, no, I mean, I think we're gonna see a rollback on, some regulatory, compliance type things, like we're seeing, like, reporting, and a lot of that has been rolling back. I think we're gonna see some of the policies stripped back to the statutory requirements. And I think that can be good in some ways where we're just gonna say this is what the law requires and not maybe add, a bunch of agency sauce to it that every agency thinks they're so unique, right? The FAR has the FAR, and then we have every agency has their, you know,
Supplements.
supplement to the FAR. So, I'm hoping we'll see some of that stripped back. I think it's going to be an interesting time. I'm seeing all sorts of people talk about how they're writing 100-page FARs or, pulling
Yeah,
the
I saw
FAR
that too.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what it looks like because I've actually thought about what would the FAR look like if we just stripped it back. Having sat in some of those working group meetings and hear the discussion of, talking about writing the FAR to the intent of the law, I mean, the laws sometimes are passed that they just tell us what the outcome needs to be, not how to get there. So, some of what the FAR does is it gives us the process to get to the intent of the law. So, sometimes you have to keep that in there because you do have to have a process to do things. It's just how cumbersome does that process need to be? I think, and that's maybe where we're gonna see some of that simplify, I hope. I haven't heard anybody in government yet talking about, going after the FAR. This has all been people on the side having fun, but I think it's an interesting concept that, I think we're gonna see over time, the Civilian Agency Acquisition Council, the FAR Council, some of those folks, I mean, I think we're gonna see them being asked to, relook at some of the things they've done, and I know in my old office where I sat in the FAR cases we looked at, they have pushed those cases back to, the agencies and to the FAR Council and said, "Hey, the administration is saying we want you to take another look at these and, see if this is really needed." And if it is, does it have to be done this way? So that's why we're not seeing any, you know, draft proposed rules or final rules coming out right now. It's
Yeah.
all under review right now. So,
Yeah, lots of the regulation that comes out could come out as policy on an agency by agency basis, I think is what I
yeah.
hear you say. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, but at the same time, it also feels that FAR has become like a 50-year history book of lessons learned. Like,
Right. I would agree with that. Yeah, it's so risk averse
yeah,
anymore. And that's kind of I learned in an era where my boss said if the FAR doesn't say you can't, then that's your gray area. So let's live in the gray area. Let's work within the gray area. I think some people have learned that the FAR, if it doesn't say you can, then you shouldn't. I think that's the wrong way to deal with the FAR. So I would like to see, if we're going to keep the FAR, kind of have it be like, the guardrails, but not necessarily, have
the
some
roadmap.
we have some a roadmap, but not have, have some flexibility in there so that you can take advantage of more, business like, commercial like and streamlined processes that agencies can up with over time.
Yeah. So contracting officers, you know, even before Doge was happening, it was, you know, a field where it's been really hard to retain the really talented people who can come up with those kinds of creative solutions. And
Right.
so, is this an opportunity that we can think of some other ways, given an even more limited workforce, or maybe we're consolidating them in smaller places to really train and concentrate folks on, look, yes, the FAR gives you lots of different options, but just know that, here's the mission purpose. How you get from here to there. Try not to look what you did in the past. Let's look future, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think over time, like you said, it's been a field that's been very hard to retain people in. If you're a good contracting officer, you could get a job anywhere,
Yeah.
and it happens that fast. I mean, when people that worked for me were wanting a promotion and they start looking, I know I'd already lost them if I didn't have some place I could put them because they were good and they were going to find some place, and as long as they got a great recommendation, which I would always give, that's what's going to happen. So it was a constant churn. I mean, most offices are never fully staffed in the contracting offices anyway, and I tell people it's a thankless job because you don't take summer vacations and you're not there at your kids' first day of school, and you're not there, at back to school night and all these things, usually that happen in August and September, and it's really tough. But I think there's a lot of room for maybe implementing maybe some of these AI tools into this area where it comes to maybe doing market research better or doing streamlining some of those more mundane tasks and decisions. Like just something as simple as clause logic would be so nice to get into a contract writing system that really worked well. In my entire lifetime as a Fed, never saw a good clause logic system in the contract writing tools. And, where you could just say, I have a fixed price contract, it's over this dollar amount, it's for construction, pull my clauses for me. I
Yeah.
mean, that would save so much time. I don't think people understand how much time that alone would just save.
Yeah.
There's been contract writing tools over the years that have attempted clause logic, but it's never been perfect. And then as rules change, that clause logic has to keep up. And so I think that's been the problem is have started with something really good. Like in DoD, I think it was SP2 or something is what we called it. PD squared, that's what it was. And it had great clause logic to start out with, but the rules change so fast. You got to keep up the clause logic with it, right? So
Ah,
and
yes.
it's not always just the clause is the clause. The clause is here, but it also ties in over here and it ties in over there. And you got to get um, all that cross look that you have to do in the FAR when you're reading on a subject incorporated in that as well. So I think there's some room there for some of those tasks to get streamlined for sure.
Yeah. I agree. Just like anything. And I think
Right.
it's simple, but largely effective solutions. And, you're talking about how to make government more efficient. It's something like that. I think the
Yeah. Time
809
savers.
panel visited a lot of these kinds of things,
Mhm.
not too long ago. And, we're still waiting for those recommendations to be implemented.
Well, and that's the thing. I've been around long enough that I've seen that happen in cycles, and it's been frustrating because people get really excited about these things and they try to do them. Like there were times where we talked about automating, proposal evaluation and how to do that. And there are some tools out there
Yep.
that do it. But how well do they do it? And do they take into account, subjectivity and certain things that the government wants to have in their evaluation? And so I have yet to see any fantastic tools come out of that. I've seen a lot of excitement over the years, and then it just kind of, fades out.
Fades out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, having been in the cost evaluation room on the government side, like doing those completeness checks,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
days. That's days of sitting there.
Yeah.
You do L 5.1.1. Yep. 5.1.1.2. Like
Yeah.
that's the first thing that typically it's someone like you, getting a contract
Right.
officer with the help, an auditor like me.
Yeah.
Like we're not even evaluating. We're just saying, did you even answer the question?
Yeah. Check the block. Did you check the block? I
Yep.
mean, Yeah, I think there's a lot of room for improvement in that. That is a time-consuming process, and
Yes.
especially depending on the number of proposals you get in. It can be daunting. I know when I was over in Afghanistan and deployed over there, we would get 80, 90 proposals on, like a road segment over there, and it would be
Oh my
just daunting.
goodness.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow, for one requirement.
Yeah, one
Oh,
requirement.
sorry.
Most every
This is not an
requirement, quite
IDIQ. This is
frankly.
just for like, we're gonna help you build a bridge
We're
over,
gonna help you build a section of
Kandahar or something.
road. Yeah, a
Oh
section
my
of
goodness.
road or something. Yeah,
Oh my
yeah, it was
goodness.
tough.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
crazy.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
mean,
there's
go
room.
ahead.
Room for improvement.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, while we're on that topic, I mean, let's talk a little bit about that proposal evaluation process in competitives. You know, I always tell companies when you're submitting under a competitive source selection to do that RFP checklist on behalf of the people evaluating, because
Right.
you're still dealing with people evaluating proposals. Just for that very reason, that's why it made me think and want to talk about it. So I don't know if you
Yeah.
want to give any perspective on how to help people get more strengths and weaknesses. I mean, it sounds
Yeah. Well,
easy.
I just recently have reviewed a couple of proposals, and I think the biggest thing is remembering not to just regurgitate the requirements back to the government. Number
Yes.
1, number 1, I know that the scopes of work and the performance work statements oftentimes read, "The contractor must da 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 da." And if your proposal just says, "We will da 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 da," we're gonna be like, "Okay, anybody can say that." But how do you demonstrate it? So what you wanna do is you wanna weave demonstrated, um, you know, experience and depth and breadth of skills into your narrative on each of those so that it shows and supports what you're saying, yes, you can do. So I think that's probably the biggest thing is to get, strengths that way. You will get weaknesses if you just regurgitate the
Uh,
requirements back.
can we introduce the term incumbentitis? I remember I
That's mine. Yeah, I love
uh,
that.
uh, yeah, I remember being in the room with the source selection evaluation board, and they were just so frustrated that the incumbent was just doing what you just said. They're just like, well, as your agency is well aware, we do this, and we are able to generate this report." And they were like, they didn't give us any. Like, you could see the portfolio manager like was almost in tears, like, I'm gonna lose these
Yes.
people that I love, and no could contracting officer or a supporting procurement lawyer is gonna look at you and say, "Give them another chance. Just do it, Baffo." No, they're gonna probably
No.
kick them out.
No, I mean, first of all, most agencies are reviewing your proposal and they're saying they will own your best proposal needs to be your first proposal, right?
Correct.
So,
Oh, love that. Wait, say that
that
one again.
your
Say that
best
one again. One.
proposal needs to be your first proposal. Don't think you're gonna get another chance. I'm just telling you, if the government can award without having to go into discussions, they will do it. They will do it because it saves so much time and hassle.
Especially now, right?
Yes.
I mean, I can see see, that's one thing just made me think of it. You want to change in procurement, they're gonna start evaluating contracting officers on speed to execute.
Yeah, the pults are gonna get insanely fast, I think.
Yeah.
The procurement acquisition lead times, the time to award will get very, very fast. I think the other thing is I've been that contracting officer on that back end, that has had to brief a company that was the incumbent that lost.
Oh,
And they will I've done it at least twice that I can remember. One time I had to tell a company that was a company that had great prices and good high quality work, and we wanted them that their proposal came across as low quality and a high priced company, and they all sat in the room and were stunned, and it was a really difficult conversation to have, especially because we wanted them, like you said, "Oh my
yeah.
gosh, we're gonna
Yeah, they
lose
were
this
probably
great
kicking out their
company."
CPARs saying, "Look, you've given me very good and exceptional CPARs."
But what they did is they regurgitated the contract, and they sat there and kind of took their current prices and kind of, upped them based on, everybody says, "Oh, go for the 4 or 5%. Go for the 4 or 5% escalation." Be realistic, people. I'm just saying, don't always go for that. And I've had another one where at one point, we asked them to find a unexploded ordnance contractor that could,
Ooh,
do part of the work. Yeah, it was clearing ranges. And they just and we required that they tell us who that was gonna be, and in their proposal, they just said, "Well, you know us, we'll find you someone." And they lost. They were the incumbent, and they lost because they didn't just give us the name of who they we knew they would probably use, but they didn't tell us, and that's because we have to go based on
what is
the
written on that
proposals
paper?
in front of us. We can't go by what we know. What we know only counts when it comes to past performance,
Yeah,
not experience,
yeah,
not any other factor.
yeah,
So, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
very painful.
Yeah, I can't emphasize the importance of understanding Section M, the
Oh,
evaluation criteria. How are you going to be evaluated? So what do you need to do in order to get those strengths assigned? How are you gonna, they say that technical plus past performance is way more important than price. Like keep that in mind. So like
yeah.
if you have a premium product, you can charge a premium price, but like you better have lots of pluses on the tech team's evaluations.
Right, because if the contracting officer, even if you're the best value, if your price is too high, they have to justify that price to the next lowest, technical firm, right? And that price premium is what they call. We're having, you have to justify the price premium, and it has to be easy to quantify for the contracting officer to see where they're getting the premium cost from in terms of the quality that's added. So it's very important if you do that, point those things out. Here's what we bring to the table that's above and beyond or extra, or what we know you'd like to have but you didn't mention in your RFP, but we know you because we know you like this, right? Or stuff like that, right? So but again, another fallacy I guess I should bring up too is that people
Please.
shouldn't expect that what the customer has always wanted, if they're an incumbent, is what they want now. That's
Ooh,
another
another
one.
good one,
So,
Shauna.
yeah, never just roll over what you've been doing. Make sure you read that requirement because sometimes the government changes its mind.
I What you just said is exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like all the stuff that's going to come up for recompete,
Yeah.
especially within the next 6, 12 months. You bet
Absolutely.
your bottom dollar if they're A, allowed to keep it going, B, their the language is gonna drastically change. Like
Yes.
monthly reports are gonna go from, update me on key personnel and amount spent to what difference did you make in your contract? What was the ROI? What
Right.
savings did you generate? How many lives did you save? All
Right.
that it's gonna drastically change.
Yes, yes, and if you're not tracking it to that, you're not gonna be prepared. So you do kinda need to kinda look at how you're tracking now and look at what the government's kind of leaning toward what it wants to know about projects and things. I mean, we hear about it in the news every day.
All
What
time.
are we looking at trying to save or accomplish now in terms of, cost savings, cost cutting? It's gonna be that type of reporting, like you said, for sure.
Love it. Well, Shauna, we've covered a lot of great topics today. We started off, well, we kind of brought a full circle there with, what's Doge going to be doing to small businesses, and it's going to be a challenging time, but it's going to open up a lot of opportunities. It's going to open a lot of opportunities for folks to figure out, what else are you good at, and what else, how can you redefine yourself to be able to provide that great value added perspective. We're
Yes.
we're now moving out of the, hey, I'm an 8A company. You want to do business with me too? Hey, I'm a data encryption company that knows how to, keep all the bad guys away from you. That is what's going to be appealing. So
Right.
understanding, what your value proposition is, understanding the value of diversification. Uh, you know,
Yes.
if you can sell your products to commercial sector, you're going to be able to more easily sell your services in back to the government as a commercial product, which is what's supposed to be preferenced.
Yes.
We talked about, if you're new to government, you don't have to have a GSA scheduled contract. Sure, it's like Shauna, you said it was a marketing device. I agree with that. There's plenty of other ways to get in.
Yeah.
If and when the time is right, go get on the schedule. And so I think we talked a lot of great things. How, Shauna, what else do you want folks listening to today's episode taking away from our discussion today?
Well, I think, things are really challenging and kind of crazy right now, but I think if you just kind of take a breath, right? Um, don't get too reactionary. Sit back and think about who you know, and what you do, and start building a strategy that branches out from what you're already trying. I think you're going to be okay. I think it's just, looking at, again, different places maybe that you haven't focused at before, different ways that you look at what you provide, and how to get there with that in terms of whether it's a prime, a sub, a group of small businesses, or maybe outside in the state and local government, higher education arenas, or anywhere in between. I think you're going to be fine. It's just take a breath,
Yeah, don't give up.
breathe.
Don't give up. You started this
Don't.
business for a reason, and you
Yeah.
had a vision 5 years ago. Maybe 5 years ago, it may not be the greatest starting point, but anyways, you had a vision how many years ago when you started your business?
Right.
Follow up on that and think, okay, there's some other way we can do this.
Yep, it's called reinventing. We all have to do it, and we see these changes every, so often. It swings back and forth in terms of what we see and what we get, and it's just one of those faster swings than we were anticipating,
Exactly.
and we'll be okay.
Yeah, the government is not going away. It's not
No,
going out of business. It's just going to change. It's going to be different.
it's going to reshape.
Um, some agencies will be combined with others. Who knows what? I mean, Homeland Security didn't exist 24 years ago, so that kind of stuff. So
Right.
uh, it's just going to be different.
Yep.
Shauna,
Good
this has been
point.
really great. I want to make sure you take a minute to plug your website. You had lots of great references up there. Where can people find all the things that you've been talking about today?
Well, I have a website called fedsubk.com. It's fedsubk.com. And I have a resource library out there. I have a pretty healthy, robust blog, and I have some places to start, or just check that you've checked the boxes on your way, and some training about how to maybe look at the market in ways that maybe you haven't thought of.
Love it. Yeah, it's a great resource, folks. I highly recommend it. Uh, if you listen to today's podcast, please connect with Sean and myself on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear your feedback, good, bad, indifferent, more ideas that you want us to talk about on the Optimized podcast. We're very much open to this. Shauna, you've been awesome as always. I really appreciate you taking out time to talk with us today.
Thanks, Jeff. It's been great.